On or about April 1st, 1942, a Navy lieutenant intervenes to keep a Japanese guard from beating an American prisoner of war to death. Richard Antrim would go on to outwit his Japanese captors, helping American forces to know exactly where the POWs were being hailed. The former action would earn him a Medal of Honor, and the latter, the Bronze Star. Hello and welcome to The Ultimate Sacrifice, created by Bill Risen. I'm your host and senior pastor of River Church, Louis Marsh. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're going to watch closely today. Be sure and give us a like and a subscribe if you can, and let's get back to our story. Antrim was born in Peru, Indiana, and entered the Naval Reserve in 1926. He received an appointment to the United States Naval Academy in 1927 and graduated on June 4th, 1931. He married Mary Jean Pickard shortly before he graduated. He served on several battleships before he received flight instruction at the Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida. Then he served consecutive tours of sea duty on the USS Salinas, the USS Nitro, and the USS Trenton. Subsequently ordered to the Bethlehem Steel Corporation in Quincy, Massachusetts, Antrim assisted in fitting out the USS Portland, and after her commissioning served as a division officer in that heavy cruiser. Later he underwent instruction in lighter-than-air flight, called LTA flight, at the Naval Air Station Lakehurst, New Jersey. Antrim subsequently received his Naval Aviator designation and qualified for duty as an airman, kite, or free balloon pilot. In the spring of 1938, Antrim arrived on the Asiatic Station and served as executive officer of the USS Bittern before joining the USS Pope in December of 1939 as her executive officer. The outbreak of war in the Pacific in December of 1941 found Antrim still serving in that capacity. During her brief wartime career, the Pope played a significant part in three major engagements fought by the venerable Asiatic Fleet destroyers: the battles of Balikpapan, Bandung Strait, and the Java Sea. In the former, Pope delivered close-range attacks that momentarily helped to delay the Japanese landings at Balikpapan. During the action, Lieutenant Antrim received targets for his guns and torpedoes, placing his shots accurately in the midst of a large Japanese convoy and thus inflicting damage to several enemy ships. After the Battle of Padang Strait, Pope's commanding officer, Commander Welford C. Blinn, reported that his executive officer was, quote, highly deserving of commendation for the meritorious performance of his several duties before and throughout the action, unquote. Citing Antrim as a, quote, ready assistant in navigation, fire control, and torpedo fire, unquote, Blinn recognized him not only for a destroyer command, but he also recommended, quote, decoration deemed appropriate, unquote. Antrim would later receive the Navy Cross for this service. The Battle of the Java Sea, which was the 27th to the 28th of February 1942, ended all Allied hope of stemming the Japanese onslaught. In the wake of that action, the smashed Allied fleet attempted to escape the cordon of Japanese warships, rapidly tightening their noose around the island of Java. Among the small group was one composed of the British heavy cruiser, the HMS Exeter, the destroyer HMS Encounter, and the Pope. Antrim was serving as executive officer of the USS Pope when it sank on March 1st, 1942. Nearly all the sailors escaped to lifeboats, but then they ran into a bit of bad luck. The Japanese found the survivors before the Allied forces did. The stranded crew had survived the dangers of the ocean, but now it joined other prisoners of war in Makassar, Celebes. Life as a prisoner of war for the Japanese was harsh, to put it mildly. The Japanese could not understand the Allied prisoners who were willing to surrender. In some circumstances, a Japanese warrior had been trained that he should commit suicide before he surrendered. The Japanese believed the prisoners of war to be without honor and treated them accordingly. Thus, even the smallest gaffe could result in brutal punishment. But Antrim was braver and more admirable than the Japanese could have imagined, as he demonstrated for them one day on April of 1942. On that day, an American prisoner had failed to bow properly to a Japanese guard. The guard completely lost it. He began beating the American ferociously until the prisoner was basically senseless, and the American seemed on the verge of death. Well, Antrim just couldn't stand there. He intervened and appealed for the guard to have mercy. Hadn't the American prisoner been beaten enough? He'd meant no offense by the improper bow. The crowd of prisoners and guards gathered. Antrim's actions were shockingly brave and unheard of. He risked redirecting the guard's anger at himself instead of one of the Americans dying that day. Well, it could have easily ended up to be two, Antrim being one of them. Do you think thoughts of his wife or his two daughters flashed through his mind as he took that brave step forward? Would he ever see them again? Sadly, Antrim's plan did not work. 3 guards resumed flogging the prisoner, but now Antrim shocked them again. According to his Medal of Honor citation, he, quote, stepped forward and indicated to the perplexed guards that he would take the remainder of the punishment, unquote. The other Allied prisoners were suddenly inspired, and now the Japanese were really baffled. Could some prisoners of war actually have honor and bravery after all? Well, the end result of these events was that both Antrim and the other prisoner were spared any further punishment. And the Japanese, well, they began treating the Allied prisoners of war just a little more humanely, not much, but anything was worth having in that dire situation. And they did this all because one brave naval officer risked his life to do the right thing, but Antrim wasn't done yet. Oh, no. Later, during his captivity, the Japanese forced the prisoners to build slit trenches for bomb protection. Antrim was put in charge of that effort. Quote, through self-effacing courage and sheer audacity of purpose, unquote, his Bronze Star citation notes, quote, he caused to be constructed, under the very eyes and alert surveillance of the Japanese guards, a huge sign that read, U.S., unquote. He did it by changing the design of the trenches, and he even talked the Japanese into approving these new plans. If Antrim had been caught, he would have been immediately beheaded, but fortunately he wasn't caught. Allied planes saw the signal and thus knew to avoid that area during their bombing runs, and many prisoners' lives were saved. In the end, Antrim got something that not every prisoner of war would get. At the end of the war, he was released and returned home to his family. Ultimately liberated, after the war in the Far East ended in August of 1945, Antrim returned to the United States and enjoyed rehabilitation leave before attending the repatriated POW refresher course at the Washington Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. in May of 1946. He received the Medal of Honor and the Bronze Star Medal from President Harry S. Truman himself in ceremonies at the White House on January 30th, 1947. After a long and distinguished career, he retired on April 1st of 1954. He was advanced to Rear Admiral as he retired on the basis of his combat awards. And Richard Antrim, Rear Admiral Antrim, died in Mountain Home, Arkansas on March 7th, 1969. He was buried in Section 35 of the Arlington National Cemetery. Thanks so much for listening today. I hope you'll check out my other podcast, Tales from the Scrypt, right over there with the QR code. You can check that out and read real history along with Bible stories and see how they match up. What do they do? How historically accurate is the Bible? Well, you might be surprised. Till next time, thanks for watching. God bless you. Take care. Please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up for a like. I'd really appreciate it. And until next time, God bless you, and I'll see you later.